Welcome back, everyone. My name's Kenny. I'm here every single week to talk about movies. If you haven't yet, go ahead and subscribe. That way you can keep up to date on what I'm watching. In this video, I'm going to talk about Pet Sematary, one of my favorite Stephen King books. This version came out in 1989, but this isn't the one I'm going to talk about. No, in this version, I'm going to talk about the 2019 remake, the one that should have been great. The success of the 2017 remake of Stephen King's It left future remakes for the author's filmography inevitable. The 2019 remake of Pet Sematary, though, it seemed to take the success of it for granted, as if all they had to do was make the movie and the money would just follow. So the remake opens with the introduction of the Creed family. We've got Lewis and Rachel, and we've got their two kids, Ellie and Gage, along with their cat, Church. Now, once the family starts to get moved in and settled, Ellie and her mom see like this weird ceremony where these kids are all in these masks walking towards what we find out later to be the Pet Sematary, clearly some kind of, I don't want to say a cult, but like some sort of weird kind of a ritual. And I thought, this is really going to be interesting. This is kind of a different angle that I'd be interested to see how it plays out. It doesn't play out. This is the only time we ever see them, which is kind of a missed opportunity. They really could have taken this movie in an interesting direction. And that's kind of where my problems with this movie starts. The movie kind of starts or kind of builds something up. It doesn't really, nothing really comes from it. And a lot of the scenes are a little bit too short for there to be any good character development. I'll get into that as we keep talking about this movie. So just a few moments later, Ellie ends up following the trail up to the Pet Sematary. And again, the kids aren't there. They kind of should have been, but they're not. Whatever they had to do, I guess, was quick enough for them to complete by the time Ellie kind of caught up. And she sees this huge debris pile. She kind of starts to climb up it. But, you know, an old man tells her to get down and she falls on a beehive and gets stung by a bee. The old man turns out to be Judd. I didn't really like the casting of Judd, and I really like Jonathan Lithgow. He's a fantastic actor, but for this movie, I don't feel like this was the right role for him. The original Judd, kind of this big lumbering guy with a really deep, booming, kind of a baritone voice that just really commanded presence when he spoke. And John Lithgow's voice, I don't want to say nasally, but it's much higher, and it doesn't command the same attention that Judd's voice had. He's such an important character to the story. I feel like kind of a stronger presence is necessary for that role, and I don't think John Lithgow brought that. Anyway, Judd helps her with her bee sting. By the way, she steps on a beehive and she gets stung once. He rubs some mud on it and she's good. Then the mom comes and we get this kind of a very forced, rushed introduction of those three characters. And that's what this movie does constantly. It rushes through scenes, forcing characters together just to produce relationships rather than having them develop organically. You know, there's no reason Ellie couldn't have fallen and maybe twisted her ankle, causing Judd to have to carry her back home. That would have been a much more dramatic situation and potentially allowed for like a more intimate moment between the two characters. I am just not convinced that this tiny bee sting situation would cause them to have such a profound relationship, but they do. Ellie and Judd have such an incredible bond, but on the screen, we never see it. Later on, Ellie sneaks into Judd's house and she ends up inviting him over to their place for dinner, and we get a scene where Judd and Lewis now get a meet. But again, that's a very quick scene, and the two of them forming any sort of relationship out of that moment doesn't seem very convincing to me. A little bit later, Ellie's cat, it ends up getting run over. Judd finds it and kind of pulls Lewis to the side, and the two of them kind of agree to try, and hide it from Ellie. So Lewis makes up some excuse that the cat had run away, and Judd kind of goes along with it. Well, Judd now, has an internal struggle that he doesn't want to let Ellie down. So Judd gets Lewis, and they go past the Pet Sematary, over this giant debris pile, through these really murky woods, swampy areas. It's nighttime. There's howling wolves in the distance, up this weird, staircase, something carved into the mountainside. It's just this really far off, distant place. This is just too much to believe. They don't know each other. Lewis and Judd met twice in this movie, and now we're supposed to assume that Lewis is willing to follow Judd through the creepy forest for what seems like a long journey, just to bury a cat? The original 89 version made it clear that, these two men were very, very close. Lewis would go to Judd's house almost every night. They would drink beers, smoke, talk about life and family and work, and just through the time you can see them develop a very a profound, deep relationship. And Judd becomes kind of like a surrogate father to Lewis. In fact, it's in the book. Here, let me read it real quick. Lewis Creed, who who had lost his father at 3 and who had never known his grandfather, never expected to find a father as he entered his middle age. But that was exactly what happened. Although he called this man a friend, as a grown man must do when he finds the man who should have been his father relatively late in life. It's right there. Page 1, paragraph 1. And this new movie just boils this relationship down to just a couple interactions, and suddenly now they're going to the ancient burial grounds together. It's as if the movie assumes that we've all already seen the movie, and they're just kind of rushing things along to kind of move the story forward. In fact, this is a little bit out of order, but I gotta say it now because we're in the middle of talking about this rushed character development. So Lewis's father-in-law, in the original movie, they didn't like each other. His father-in-law blamed him for Gage's death, and they ended up getting in a big fight during the funeral, and there was a lot of tension between the two characters. But in this new movie, the only scene between the two of the men is when Rachel's getting into the car to drive away with her father, and the father-in-law and Lewis kind of look at each other kind of in a weird tense moment, and that's it. This makes no sense unless you've either read the book or watched the original movie. In this movie, there's no reason for the two men to not like each other. The movie just assumes that we know what happened. But I mean, the remake shouldn't be made assuming that everybody did their homework and watched the first one first. But that's not how this works. A remake is you remake it. You make it up again. You don't just start the movie with everybody in the audience knowing that Judd and Lewis are really close and then go from there. No, you build that relationship all over again. You don't just start a movie knowing that the father-in-law and Lewis don't like each other and then go from there. No, you build it up all over again, and that's what this movie doesn't do. It just starts from where the last movie left off. Anyway, let's back up just a little bit. I'm sorry I went too far. I didn't mean to scare you, but I just had to get that moment off my chest. So, again, I gotta remind you one more time, this is a spoiler video. And if you're having second thoughts about having this movie being spoiled on you, then now's the time to leave because this is a big reveal. The original movie killed off Gage. This movie, they decide to kill off Ellie instead. But the way they do it is so cheap. The family's at a party in their yard, and you see a big truck driving towards them at the same time. And the camera just follows Gage as if to tease everybody in the audience that this is the moment Gage is getting ready to be killed. But Lewis saves Gage at the last moment, and the truck turns and it ends up hitting Ellie. And this shift is completely pointless without being under the condition that we all thought it was going to be Gage. There was no reason to do this to build tension. Just think of the original movie. You had Gage walking towards the road with the dad running after, and then when the truck finally hits, that's a huge emotional scene in the movie. You know, we didn't have to have Ellie also running into the street and for like a misdirection, but that's exactly what this movie does. It has Gage running in the street as a misdirection for the real tragedy, which is going to be Ellie getting hit. If Ellie's going to be killed, tell the story as if Ellie's going to get killed. Don't tell the story as if Gage is going to get killed and then pull the rug out from under us. Imagine if you had never seen the original. That scene would probably just be really confusing. So anyway, the big change in this movie was Ellie's killed instead. And I actually have my own thoughts about this. I think with today's audience, it might have been hard to pull off killing an infant. I mean, as messed up as it sounds, killing a little girl and having her come back as a murdering zombie is a little more palatable than an infant. So anyway, like I talked a little bit about before, after the funeral, everybody in the family except for Lewis leaves and Lewis stays behind. And he uses that opportunity to dig up his daughter, bring her to the pet cemetery, which brings her back. Now, when she comes back to life, the movie just gets weird. They tried to make some changes, but they're just like weird changes. Like she's back and she has some fuzzy memories about being in the afterlife. They don't really play with that whole idea as much as I would like them to. Instead, they play with the idea that, she's going to be a normal girl now. So dad, gives her a bath and then he tucks her into bed. It's weird. The next day she goes across the street to Judd's house. I guess she talked to Norma on the other side, which is Judd's wife. And for some reason, Norma's, not happy with Judd. So she kills him. And again, she kills him in a way, at least it's filmed in a way, that insists you watch the previous movie. We all know in the original that Gage cut the back of Judd's ankle. So this movie plays with that idea, assuming that that's what's going to happen. So there's a lot of close-ups on the back of his feet, and if you had never seen the original, it wouldn't make much sense. Anyway, Judd does end up getting the back of his ankle cut out, but this time instead of by the bed, it's on the stairs, and then she kills him. So I guess whatever Norma told her in what little time she had while she was dead, convinced her to come back and actually kill Judd. So back at home, Rachel ends up coming back, and now we have the whole family there. We have, the parents along with the daughter, who's a zombie daughter. This kind of grosses Rachel out. I don't think Rachel wants a zombie daughter. She's kind of disgusted at the whole idea. And I think Ellie senses this for some reason. I don't know. She ends up killing her mother as well, and then dragging her body as a little tiny child, dragging her mom's body all the way to the pet cemetery, which the movie has already established as being very far away and up, up a mountain. Maybe she also gets superhero strength as a zombie. Then the mom comes back to life and kills the dad. The last thing you see is Gage sitting in a car by himself with the zombie family kind of lumbering towards him to kind of get him next. It is a very downer ending, but the way they did it, it just seemed so like Goosebumps ending. The way it was filmed didn't match the tone. The first movie, I mean, it had some crummy acting and like an overall kind of a made-for-TV vibe to it. As bad as that was, it's so much better than this movie. For what the original was lacking in acting, it more than made up for in its content. The first movie did a much better job at kind of explaining itself to you to allow you to go along with these characters. The new movie didn't do that at all. The whole time, I had to remember back to the original movie in order to sympathize with them. There's just a lot of scenes that just aren't really substantive. For instance, when Judd comes over for dinner that one night, we could have learned about Judd's wife, Norma. There could have been some foreshadowing back there about, what happened between the two of them. Or Lewis could have, said something about his family or offered something to serve the plot or character development. Instead, it seems like that scene was only in that movie so Judd can tell them that the pet cemetery is part of their property. I don't care whose property it is. I don't care who owns it. I don't know. I'm not here I can't fix the movie. I'm not a director or a writer. No one's going to listen to me. All I can do is just rant. I feel like this is going to be one of my longer videos. It's just, I have a lot to say about this because, I love reading Stephen King. At any point in time, I'm either in the middle of a Stephen King book or I'm getting ready to start one. And Pet Sematary is one of my favorite Stephen King books, which kind of makes this movie even worse to me. It's just a bunch of trash. Anyway, tell me what you guys think. Tell me how you felt about the remake. I'm really curious to know, has anybody watched the remake Pet Sematary but not seen the original Pet Sematary? I'd love to read some of your comments, and maybe you can tell me if watching the new one you felt like you were kind of left out during a lot of scenes, kind of not knowing where they were going, not having the original as a reference. Anyway, that's about all I've got. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't yet, go ahead and subscribe. That way you can stay up to date on what I'm watching. I'm Kenny, and until next time, let's not only watch movies, let's talk about them too.